whose words and cries of pain we will never hear, and yet to whom we are linked in a past that is never dead and never really past, and a future that never arrives but beckons us and keeps us going. And so history never ends, the last page is never written, and the best pages are written not by princes, presidents, prime ministers, popes, but by the people. For all their faults and shortcomings, the people are all we have. In fact, we are they. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello, 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 hello. How's it going? You guys are quiet as hell today. Thank you, Rampton. Well, now I'm here, baby. I'm here. Alright, so yeah, today I just wanted to talk about a few things. As you guys may know, I released a couple of videos the past few days. One about Ethan Klein of H3 Productions, and then one about Western Marxism versus Eastern Marxism. Just to talk about Ethan real quick, yeah, it's interesting to see this happening, this whole drama play out, which you guys may not know. He basically helped launch this new smear campaign of anti-Zionists online, and the hypocrisy of it is that he's got literally like 40 different instances of him saying the N-word or being anti-Semitic and all these different things. And it's weird too, because I used to be, if you were a white kid growing up in high school in America, like I was, you probably knew about H3. He was huge, like 5-6 years ago. So I was a fan. But it's fascinating because I did not know about 80% or more of the things he says there. Like, I know he did some edgy stuff, but like that level I was like not aware of at all. So yeah. But yeah, the video is doing pretty well. I wanted to I kind of had to get the video out fast. I wanted to, because it already got delayed by demonetization bullshit. So there were some clips I accidentally left out. So I might either do a second part or just do a revised version of that part with the extra clips, and also properly balancing the audio. But yeah, it's just interesting to see how much Zionism just poisons your mind and just makes you basically go insane. It's because, I don't know, I mean, Ethan always struck me as a fairly intelligent guy, but he's just completely lost his mind. And it just shows like how sick these ideologies are, that they can make, I don't know, maybe Ethan was always a terrible guy. I think maybe it's a mixture. I don't know. But yeah. it's interesting to see play out. Do I have anything else to really say about that? Yeah, I don't think I have anything else really to say. Just check out the video if you're interested. The more interesting thing and the main thing I wanted to talk about is my other video, which talks about Domenico Lacerdo's book, Eastern versus Western Marxism, and I wanted to kind of respond to some comments about that video. I got a lot of positive responses, and then I also got some negative ones. So I want to look at all the comments again, or not all of the comments, but some comments, and respond. And if someone feels they have something interesting to offer or a good counter argument that isn't, stupid and a waste of time, then you can message me in the Discord and I could bring you on to talk about it. Yeah. So let me bring that up. Western Marxism is basically Trotskyism, while Eastern Marxism has fallen into national chauvinist tendencies. Yeah, we'll get into that. I don't super disagree with that. Ethan was just a naturalized liberal who never read into anything. Yeah, I don't know. I think Ethan is like mostly just a normie who got completely brainwashed into unfortunately supporting a horrific ideology, I don't think no one is immune to brainwashing, But he definitely never overcame that brainwashing. And Gila no better, obviously. Gila's even worse. She's the one who was like, they were saying war crimes or something, and Ethan was like, yeah, I don't deny that the IDF committed war crimes, and then Gila's like, I deny it. It's like, oh, you're just like a fascist freak. Okay. Okay. So for those of you who haven't watched the video, I basically argue that the Western and Eastern Marxist dichotomy is that Lacerdo comes up with is kind of not the best way to see the world, and that the better way to see the world is through the framework of a national Marxism. I say national leftism, but I should have said Marxism. But either way works. National Marxism. W impression of Gila. I deny it, dude. Okay, I need to go back to Gila for a second, okay? Because way back in the day, H3 actually had good comedy. Like he like set like almost a generation of like young white kids in high school's humor. And not all a bad way. He had some funny ass skits. A lot of it's probably outdated now, but like he had some pretty funny skits and some pretty funny humor he could pull out. But his wife is like a fucking zombie. Like Ghoul Queen is not a bad way to say it, because like she never said like a single interesting or funny thing in like the 5 or 6 years that H3 was like making YouTube videos. Like, and I mean, I don't know. And people always loved Gila so much, and my reaction was just like, she is so, like, just boring. I don't know. At least compared to Ethan. But, okay, back on track. Oh, I forgot what I was even talking about. Remind me what I was talking about. Getting old is hard. Dementia starts to set in. But yeah, anyway, so Lacerdo in his book was saying, you know, Western Marxism, which is obviously emerges from Western thought, is, like, to put it simply, bad, right? It's not good, which I agree in a lot of ways. But then he talks about how Eastern Marxism in comparison is, like, you know, the way to go. And, you know, that's what actually gets things done. But his whole argument is kind of very, and I agree that the East has done better, but his argument is very reductive, and it ignores, like, the many, many disputes between Eastern Marxists, you know? The Sino-Soviet split, China invading Vietnam, Cambodia invading Vietnam, all of these, you know, things that really complicate his narrative. And I think the better framework is to look at things through national Marxism versus international Marxism. National Marxism is, and as an example of national Marxism, I point to China, which is basically like, it's basically, it's done a lot of good things, but it's primarily concerned with itself and its own enrichment rather than helping the world become more enriched. And that isn't totally true. And, you know, they at least do more favorable trade policies, but, you know, they don't protect other countries from invasions by the US or anything like that, which the Soviet Union did. And some people objected to all of that argument. And so I want to respond to that and other stuff in the comments. Oh, and then not also Eastern Marxism, you know, Mao literally supporting the U.S., you know. So someone said the DPRK funds liberation movements like in Palestine or the Black Panthers. I didn't know that. That's cool. But again, I criticized North Korea by saying, like, Juche, the guy that made Juche, literally fled the country. He's a defector. And there's many things in Juche that are not... Dude, okay, Rochester, please stop saying that Mao siding with the U.S. against the Soviet Union is realism. That's not realism, okay? You're worshiping a cult of Mao in your head, who is flawless and doesn't make mistakes, and he's like playing 4D chess in his head. Mao had Parkinson's. Parkinson's causes dementia. Mao was suffering from dementia when he made these decisions, okay? He was not just some, like, 5D chess playing genius by siding with the U.S. Okay, let me see. So there was some... Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry if I misunderstood you. Okay, so this is an example of one of the comments I got that were pushing back on me saying, you know, China should intervene. So It's in the interest of the third world working class for the socialist nation to develop itself, to suggest it pursues a suicidal policy towards Israel, and by extension the US, is quite contradictory. China, one has to remember, is still a third world nation. It is not capable, it is not a superpower on the level of the USSR, capable of engaging in technology transfer because its level of development is high, but rather a country still in the middle of creating an independent technological industry to sustain itself. Okay, so I'm very confused what he means when he says the China is still a third world nation. China has a bigger economy than America. China has still poor sectors of society in it. China has poor people within China, yes, but the Soviet Union also had poor people in the Soviet Union. Everyone was pretty equal. No one was dying of starvation, but there were still, especially in the rural areas. And he says there's also an urban-rural divide in China. There was an urban-rural divide in the Soviet Union. Throughout the Soviet Union's existence, there was an urban-rural divide. That's almost every country has an urban-rural divide. So that's not an excuse. So China might have a smaller military than the Soviet Union did, but China has a way more larger economy. So the proxy war strategy was one of the reasons of the exhaustion of Soviet socialism, military expenditure. So I agree that the Soviet Union spent too much in military expenditure, obviously. But that doesn't mean that China can't learn from the Soviet Union's mistake and put money into military expenditure while not going way overboard like the Soviets did, right? China can invest in a military to protect the world from imperialism without investing as much as the Soviet Union did. But also, the Soviet Union did a lot with that investment. The Soviet Union did a ton with that investment to protect the world. And countries like Cuba and Vietnam and North Korea are alive today because Soviet Union helped them. China also helped a lot of these countries somewhat, but very little compared to the Soviet Union. They really didn't do much. And yes, they were poorer then, but I'd argue that China is far richer now than the Soviet Union is. And the thing also is that if the US really retaliates to China stopping America, if the US retaliates, right? If China starts fighting back against American invasions, if America tries to embargo China and shit, that's going to hurt the US a ton because the markets are so intertwined. But China has plenty of potential to expand its markets. Central Asia, they can expand their markets to Central Asia. They can expand their markets to Russia, which is a pretty evil country in a lot of ways, but still. They can expand their markets to India, although India is also run by a fascist. So, but there is some I believe they've officially resolved the border conflict between India and China. China also has the entirety of Southeast Asia as a market, so they have plenty of other markets they can expand to besides the U.S. Right? China is not going to die if the U.S. cuts off its markets. You know who's going to die? The U.S. And also the U.S. would probably be benefited because you know what? If a Bernie Sanders come to power when that happens, then they're going to have to reindustrialize. They're going to have to build factories and actually make things in America or whatever. So even if you're a liberal, it's kind of almost in your interest in the long term. I feel maybe. So, I mean, I don't think that's the worst criticism, what Brandon makes, but I still disagree. Okay, so this guy says that China is not a first world country. I agree that unquestionably the USSR was more equal than China. Unquestionably. But was the USSR richer than China? I don't think so. So, I don't understand how China wouldn't have the productive forces to be able to you know, have a more active foreign policy. They're literally called the world's factory. Like, they're literally called that, you know? I mean, I don't know if you guys read that, what you think about that. Let's see. I can't read that, bro. You gotta do some paragraph breaks. Oh, another weird thing about Eastern Marxism is that, like, that idea is that, like, you know, I mean, Marx, as someone else pointed out in the comments, Marx and Engels were both Western. They were both deeply in the West. They grew up in fucking England, right? And Germany. They were, like, totally from the West. So it's just an awkward label. China, persuasive diplomacy and win-win cooperation is causing most of global South against imperialism. It doesn't matter that they're against imperialism if they don't have the guns and the material ability to fight imperialism. It doesn't matter how anti-imperialist a country is if it already got bombed until everyone is dead. Right? Or exploited ruthlessly, you know? Like, you can't just be against imperialism. You need, like Cuba didn't survive because it was super against imperialism. Cuba survived because the Soviet Union was giving it extremely favorable trade deals that hurt the Soviet Union, and because the Soviet Union was sending it military assistance. That's why Cuba survived. Orthodox Marxism versus Protestant Marxism is an interesting way to put it. So this person says, I feel like the problem with the national versus international premise is that it is impossible to be internationalist without first being national. And I totally believe that, which is why I think that, the Palestinians have the right to resist, even if they're not all socialists. Because to build an internationalist socialist movement, you need to build a nationalist movement that creates enough of a living standard that people can start looking towards being internationalist in their perspective. Cuba has been around longer now without the Soviet Union than with the Soviet Union. Yes, but first of all, they were extremely struggling when the Soviet Union collapsed. They basically had a famine. And secondly, they still have the Soviet weapons that got sent to them. It wouldn't be just like a cakewalk for America to invade Cuba. Yeah, another thing that people don't bring up about Cuba that I kind of realized recently too is their geographical location is really rough too. Because hurricanes, they are constantly getting destroyed by hurricanes. And all the countries in that area are never able to and it's just going to get worse with climate change. Cuba, it's sad. It's going to get worse and worse for Cuba because of climate change. Which is ironic because they have great environmental policies. They have the best environmental policies of any country on earth. But yeah, it's unfortunate. But yeah, another consequence of China, breaking ties with the U.S. might be that things would deteriorate so bad in the U.S. that you would potentially create the conditions for more revolutionary conditions. If China just switched its entire market to Central Asia and just basically all of Asia, and just really generously industrializing all those countries and making markets out of those countries, it could work in numerous ways. Thoughts on Deng? Okay, look, I haven't read anything Deng has said. I don't really know much about Deng. My impression is that he was my very surface impression is that he might have had good intentions, but he went way too far in certain ways. Like I know he abolished the rice and bowl thing, and I mean, just look at the state of China now. It has numerous billionaires. Like clearly he went too far. You know, like Lenin had the new economic plan, but that was only for a few years, and it got reversed. But this has gone way beyond that. You know, they've gone way beyond that. And I think basically the two presidents that came after Deng, especially the first after Deng, was even worse than Deng. And then I think that now Xi Jinping is sort of trying to reverse a lot of that. I don't know if he's trying to instate full socialism, but I think he's trying to at least reverse a lot of the excesses that Deng caused. But that's without knowing much about Deng. I actually wanted to watch a video that someone recommended about the lead up, I believe, to the Chinese Revolution, or the Century of Humiliation, to learn more. But yeah, the guy that came after Deng seems like the worst. Like from everything I read about him, he seems like he was just straight up like a capitalist, well, pretty much. Which is a criticism to make of Marxist-Leninist states, that they seem to sometimes be way too vulnerable to just the single guy that comes to power completely just going a different direction that might not be good, you know? Why couldn't we have, why couldn't we have a Xi Jinping right after Deng? Why did it have to be two guys who are not like Xi Jinping? And just let a bunch of billionaires come to power. I mean, Lenin and Stalin were Eastern. I mean, I consider Russia Eastern, and Stalin was Georgian, which I believe is definitely Eastern. But Marx and Engels were definitely Western. Yeah, I mean, he recommodified housing, allowed landlords, removed right to work, and privatized healthcare. Yeah, there was like a bunch of like unemployment crises in China, I believe, in like the 90s. It's like it either sounds like Deng was kind of inept in his reforms or just really didn't care about how far they went. Does Red Ben have a video on Deng? Because that might be interesting. Oh, he did a 50-minute summary of Xi Jinping's governance of China. I haven't really followed this guy's channel, but these look like really interesting videos actually. This looks really cool, actually. But yeah, someone sent me this, and they're gonna send me money for watching this video. So, reminder: if you want me to watch a video, give me money and I'll watch it. All of my streams from now on are ad-free, a completely ad-free viewing experience. Not because I am a generous person, but because YouTube automatically demonetizes all of my streams. I do not know why. Which is why the only cent I make from this is any donations that you guys give. That's it. So please do not let this be a 3-hour stream where I don't make a single cent. Because that would suck. No, I like doing this. I do like doing this. The best summary of Marx you've ever seen, he does. Oh, is it this 3? Oh, here. Cool. Alright, what was I gonna do? Oh yeah, this one. No, I don't believe Chinese billionaires have a great deal of influence either, now that Jinping has cracked down on them. But just the fact that they exist is a condemnation, right? I respect them cracking down on the billionaires, but like, again, the Soviet Union never had anything close to billionaires. So I hope they continue to not just crack down, but remove them from existence, either by expropriating their money or other means. But yeah, like, billionaires just should not exist in a state that calls itself socialist, period. Or transitioning to socialism. I mean, I don't know of any Soviet millionaires. There's maybe you could like argue that like, you know, in terms of like, I mean, I can't think of any like that you could call a millionaire. Like, people had the incredible power, but in terms of just having like a million, in terms of today's money, like adjusted for inflation, however many rubles just available to spend. Maybe some to be fair, okay, maybe some very corrupt bureaucrats, right? We're doing that. We're somehow siphoning funds. That's fair. But there was no public, you know, billionaires or millionaires walking around in the Soviet Union. Thank you, Daniel. That's amazing. I really appreciate that. Do you have anything you want me to watch or have any questions? I will answer them. Anyways, let's check this out. is this Shen Yun?
Shen Yun is a Chinese performance group that dazzles Western audiences using a wide range of colors, elaborate costumes, classical Chinese music, and traditional dance, while claiming to recover 5,000 years of history, presenting an image of China before communism. Shen Yun is owned and operated by the Falun Gong, a far-right anti-communist cult that rejects modern science, women's rights, racial equality, and embraces a worldview fueled by outlandish conspiracy theories similar to QAnon. Falun Gong uses Shen Yun as a propaganda tool to push a narrative of how communism has brought decades of deceit, violence, and destruction to Chinese society, values, and identity. Falun Gong leader Li Hongji resides in the organization's multi-million-dollar headquarters, not in China, but in Deer Park, New York. And while his followers regard him as a godlike figure, he is in reality a tool of the CIA, sharing a common hostility to the Communist Party and People's Republic of China. This video is not about the Falun Gong, but seeks to address the anti-communist lies it spreads about the condition of China before communism. China was indeed once a thriving and prosperous society. However, its dramatic decline did not begin with communism, but with the Century of Humiliation, a period of foreign invasion and internal strife prior to the establishment of the People's Republic of China. To grasp this reality, we must look beyond the spectacle of Shen Yun, derive truth from fact, and delve into the concrete history of China before communism.
The same was true of pre-revolutionary China. Henry Rosemont, he notes that when the communists liberated Shanghai from the U.S.-sponsored Kuomintang reactionary government in 1949, the communists found that about 20% of the population in Shanghai, 1.2 million people, were drug addicts. And every morning, special crews of street cleaners, quote, would gather up the corpses.
Yeah, didn't Mao like completely eradicate opium addiction in China? Which is incredibly impressive, if that's true, because the Soviet Union was never able to defeat alcoholism. Stalin re-legalized like the sale of alcohol to raise money for industrialization, which is understandable, but it was never criminalized again, which I'm writing in the book I'm working on. I argue that that's a mistake because there's plenty of economic costs to having a huge swath of your population be drug-addled, drunkard, failures. There's a cost. There's medical costs. They're not employed. They're not engaging in productive labor. And they're just burdens on the state system. And those people should be cared for, but it's better if they're not alcoholics in the first place. So, yeah.
Corpses of children and adults who had been murdered during the night or died of disease, cold, and starvation.
The Qing dynasty, once a symbol of Chinese power and prestige, was subjected to immense internal and external pressure throughout the 19th century. The Qing government and society was based on a commitment to traditions which often prevented modernization efforts during the Industrial Revolution. China's military suffered as a result, greatly falling behind the technological capabilities of its rivals. The first major blow to the Qing dynasty emerged through the opium trade. As a pharmaceutical substance, opium had deep roots in Chinese culture, but as its popularity grew as a recreational drug, the commodity became a focal point of global economic interests. Until 1830, China...
Yeah, I don't see a problem with limited sale being around, but the problem was that Russia was just racked by alcoholism. And it wasn't just like, like just for fun. It was just people who wasted their entire lives being alcoholics, which again is a burden on the state.
China enjoyed a favorable trade balance in the global opium market, with a constant flow of silver coming in from India, Britain, and the US. But once Britain's East India Company opened hundreds of thousands of poppy plantations in colonies like India and Java, a vast enterprise emerged, yielding profits so large as to tip the balance of trade with China. In 1822, China imported roughly 347 tons of opium. By 1863, opium imports had increased to 4,232 tons, and by 1880 had reached 6,500 tons. This large increase in the opium supply not only undermined China's economic interest in the market, but caused widespread addiction and social harm to the Chinese population as well. The Qing dynasty attempted to curtail the social harms of opium by imposing laws against the sale or consumption of the drug, and passed storage regulations which came into direct conflict with British interests. In 1839, responding to the growing opium crisis, China's imperial commissioner, Lin Zexu, ordered the destruction of over 1,000 tons of illegal British opium stored in China. The British, seeking to maintain or maximize gain from this lucrative market, used Zexu's orders as a justification to wage war against China. The First Opium War ended in devastation for China, with 18,000 killed and harsh terms imposed by the Treaty of Nanking, which required China to open its trade ports, legalize foreign opium storage, and surrender Hong Kong to Britain. In China, the Treaty of Nanking is regarded as the first out of 23 unequal treaties that China was forced to sign throughout the century of humiliation. The unequal treaties imposed one-sided terms on China, such as ceding land, paying reparations, opening trade ports.
Yeah, the British Empire still doesn't get enough shit for just how evil it was. You know that disgusting fuck Neil Ferguson? That British Empire defender, just that absolute scum of the earth? I wonder what that scumbag says to justify the Opium Wars. I wonder if he tries to say, like, okay, that was a bad example, right? But British Empire did lots of good things. Or if he just straight up, like, says, like, well, it's more complicated, actually. No, it's not.
Ports, abolishing tariffs, legalizing opium imports, or granting extraterritorial privileges to foreigners. Resistance to the Qing dynasty began to grow shortly after China's defeat in the First Opium War, and culminated in the Taiping Rebellion of 1850. The rebellion was led by Hong Xiuquan, who, claiming to be the brother of Jesus Christ, sought to spread Christianity throughout China. His heavenly kingdom ruled over roughly 30 million Chinese at its peak, and threatened to overthrow the Qing dynasty and revolutionize the entire Chinese social order. For 14 years, both sides committed atrocities against the other, engaging in the utmost brutality, even against civilian populations. The Qing government ultimately crushed the uprising in 1871, but 20 to 30 million people, roughly 5 to 10% of China's total population, was killed in the bloody conflict. It was the deadliest battle of the 19th century, and one of the deadliest in human history.
Yeah, I think it's the deadliest civil war ever, which is crazy.
Throughout the Taiping Rebellion, the Qing government was occupied not only with civil war, but foreign military threats as well. In 1856, British authorities seized a Chinese merchant vessel off the coast of Canton under suspicion of piracy. The Chinese sailors were cleared and freed, but tensions continued to rise until 1 month later, British Marines launched an unprovoked attack on Canton forts, sparking the beginning of the Second Opium War. The Second Opium War lasted until 1860, when British and French troops occupied the Qing Emperor's Imperial Summer Palace and Old Winter Palace, looting them both and destroying the latter.
Jesus.
The war saw approximately 30,000 Chinese killed or wounded, and once again ended in China's defeat.
Okay, so what I want to know, hold on. So what I want to know is that how 30 million people can die in that civil war, but only 50,000 people die in the two opium wars. Can someone explain that to me? Because that just does not compute at all, right? Like, if you could waste 30 million human beings on a civil war, you can't, like, do the same to fight off the UK? Yeah, I get that the British had better equipment, but it's still interesting. And, also, it's like you guys didn't learn from the first Opium War to actually reform your military. Yeah.
The Chinese were forced to pay 8 million taels to Britain and France. Kowloon was surrendered to the British-owned Hong Kong. The opium trade was legalized, and foreign Christian missionaries were granted full civil rights, including the right to own property and the right to evangelize. The Second Opium War had a devastating effect on China's economy and its military, resulting in a domino effect that would last for decades to come. The Sino-French War, fought from 1884 to 1885, saw China and France vying for control over northern Vietnam, with France's naval superiority and alliances with other Western powers leading to its triumph. The British Sikkim expedition of 1888 saw the expulsion of Tibetan forces from the Kingdom of Sikkim, which reshaped the borders and cemented British influence in the region. The First Sino-Japanese War, starting in 1894, saw Japan's modern military swiftly defeating China and conquering territories in Taiwan and Korea, marking a great turning point in East Asian power dynamics. In December 1897, Kaiser Wilhelm II declared his intent to seize.
I'm just astonished by how incompetent the Qing Empire is. Like just one blow after the next. Did they even... I would like to know, were they attempting to reform while over 100 years they continually got cut down? Did they even try? I don't know.
Territory in China, which triggered a scramble for concessions among the colonial powers.
And I'm not going to be defensive of the Qing Empire because they were also, just like a monarchy, basically, which clearly did not care about its people.
The Russian occupation of Liaodong in 1898 granted Russia control over a Chinese port, while Russia's later invasion of Manchuria in 1900 saw an extermination campaign through a wave of anti-Chinese pogroms. In 1905, the Japanese seized China's Liaodong port from Russia, and in 1907, China suffered the worst famine in human history, with 25 million people perishing from starvation.
Jesus. God.
In 1894, responding to Japanese aggression, the revived China Society was founded by Dr. Sun Yat-sen to bring prosperity and modernization to China. Sun Yat-sen, widely regarded as the father of modern China, called for the overthrow of the Qing dynasty in favor of a modern nation-state, believing that the empire could not be sufficiently reformed. In 1899, Sun's opening emerged in the form of the Boxer Rebellion, which was an anti-imperialist and anti-Christian uprising led by a group of martial artists called the Society of Righteous and Harmonious Fists.
Dude, China is so fucking funny because nowhere else on Earth did you have, the brother of Jesus Christ rising up to kill 30 million people, or, a bunch of boxers rising up. You just don't hear about that stuff anywhere else. It's fascinating.
The Boxers hated the special privileges and status granted to foreigners and Christian missionaries, in contrast to the everyday Chinese. The movement spread across northern China as Boxers destroyed foreign property and murdered Christian missionaries under the slogan, "Support the Qing government and destroy the foreigners." The Qing government was able to use the Boxer rebellion as leverage in diplomatic negotiations with foreign powers because the Boxers held loyalty to the Manchu leadership. However, this sentiment was overturned by the Wuchang Uprising in October 1911, which sought to replace the Qing dynasty with a new republican form of government. The 1911 revolution, with Sun Yat-sen as one of its major leaders, was ultimately successful in toppling the Qing dynasty and ushering in a new republican era in Chinese politics. The collapse of the Qing dynasty in the aftermath of the revolution was a turning point in Chinese history and marked the beginning of the end of the century of humiliation. However, the greatest devastation was still yet to come, as China's new revolutionary government was undermined by various power struggles, including attempts to restore the Qing dynasty. From 1912 to 1915, China's republican government would be ruled by Yuan Shigai, who came to power after assuring Sun Yat-sen that Qing leadership would be dissolved under his rule. However, shortly after securing power, he outlawed Sun's Kuomintang Nationalist Party, dissolved the National Assembly, and in 1915 appointed himself emperor. After Yuan's death 1 year later, a political vacuum opened and power struggles emerged across various regions, giving rise to China's warlord era. Meanwhile, Japan, emboldened by its victories, sought to extend its control over China through aggressive diplomatic maneuvers. In 1915, under threat of military intervention, Japan issued China 21 demands, essentially demanding that China surrender its sovereignty. Japan's 21 demands sparked widespread outrage among the Chinese public, culminating in a nationwide boycott of Japanese goods, severely impacting Japan's economy and tarnishing its reputation in the eyes of its allies. After World War I, the May 4th movement of 1919, born out of student protests in Beijing, came to symbolize a resurgence of Chinese nationalism and defiance against foreign encroachment. The movement not only rallied against the Treaty of Versailles, but also laid the political and ideological groundwork for the establishment of the Communist Party of China in 1921. Meanwhile, Sun Yat-sen's Kuomintang Party became the first government of modern China, marking a great turning point in Chinese politics. With its platform of nationalism, democracy, and socialism, the Kuomintang emerged as a unifying party, with many communists, including Mao Zedong, joining the left wing of the party. Under the recommendation of the Soviet Union, the Kuomintang and the Communists allied with each other to combat warlordism through the formation of a united front. Unlike the Communist Party or the Kuomintang, warlords were solely driven by self-interest and were particularly ruthless in dealing with their populations. Zhang Zhongchang, for example, was a Chinese warlord who was notorious for his hobby of crushing in the heads of prisoners with his sword, what he called smashing melons. Warlords enforced a brutal system of tax collection, whereby many peasants were forced to sell their wives and daughters into prostitution in order to pay rent. Zhang himself had so many sex slaves, he addressed them by numbers. Due to their smaller militias, warlords were relatively easy targets, and defeating them allowed the Kuomintang and Communists to better equip themselves and grow their military power. However, the Kuomintang and the Communists always held fundamental political differences that boiled beneath the surface of cooperation. By 1927, as the near total collapse of warlordism was in sight, the new leader of the Kuomintang, Chiang Kai-shek, launched an anti-communist purge, sparking a civil war between the two parties and forcing the communists on the Long March. In 1934, the Kuomintang mobilized hundreds of thousands of troops against the communists in an all-out extermination campaign. The communists were forced to retreat through the southern province of Guangdong, through treacherous landscapes, marching for months on end until reaching the northern city of Yan'an 1 year later. Throughout the Long March, the communists continued to liberate peasants from warlords and recruit them into the Red Army, regrowing their numbers for another eventual confrontation with the Kuomintang. As civil war brought violence and destruction on the home front, Japan took the opportunity to once again attack the weakened China. In 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria and established a puppet state, and in 1937 launched a full-scale invasion on the rest of China, marking the beginning of the Second Sino-Japanese War, or World War II in Asia. The Second Sino-Japanese War is often referred to as the Asian Holocaust because of the sheer violence inflicted on almost the entire population of China. Between 1937 and 1938, after capturing the capital city of Nanking, Japanese forces proceeded to assault, loot, and indiscriminately murder all Chinese, including women, children, and the elderly. Up to 300,000 women were sexually assaulted, and up to 200,000 Chinese were murdered. The terror campaign included the mass execution of civilian populations, the arson of entire villages, and war games between soldiers, including a race to decapitate 100 Chinese. The Nanking Massacre is considered one of the most...
It's crazy that Japan went from being like just an absolute, just one of the most horrific states in human history to just being like the way it is now, you know, like the innocent uwu, like, you know, anime, all that stuff. It's like, man, they never really paid for that either. Like, there was never really much of a, like, to my knowledge, like, I mean, I guess they got 2 nukes dropped on them, but those were mostly also civilians, you know, and they almost benefited from all of that because the U.S. basically just like, and Japan cooperated to just like turn it into like a sort of colony. It is to some extent a military colony. I'm pretty sure there's many military bases in Japan. Like, yeah, I don't think any country has ever done such a good job of whitewashing its image as Japan has. It's incredibly impressive. Not in a positive way. Like Nazi Germany, you know, we have the Nazis, right? Like that'll never leave, right? Like in Germany they are supposedly always atoning for the Holocaust, and it's like an eternal atonement or whatever. Which they really just use to be Nazis again by supporting the Zionists. So it's still pathetic. But in Japan, it's like, you know, their genocides are basically like not talked about for the most part, from what I know. Well, would they have become socialists? Because the government's collapsing isn't necessarily make it socialist. But yeah, I mean, if they had a large socialist movement, which I believe Japan did have some sort of socialist movement. But it was never going to have a revolution after World War II. I mean, it was basically like a U.S. colony.
most severe war crimes in human history, but was still just a single chapter in the Second Sino-Japanese War, which ended in the death of roughly 35 million Chinese. Despite these great losses, China, for the first time in 100 years, had finally defeated colonial aggression and asserted its sovereignty against Japanese fascism. The defeat of imperialist Japan was made possible by the historic...
Yeah, there's a bunch of military bases, U.S. military bases in Japan. 3 Air Force bases, 3 Army bases, 13 Marine bases. Okay, maybe this one's inactive. 12 Marine bases. And 5 Navy bases. Fascinating.
Formation of the Second United Front between the Kuomintang and the Communists. As the Kuomintang waged a genocidal war against the Communists, the Soviets urged both sides to cease fighting each other in order to join efforts against Japan. Naturally weary of Chiang Kai-shek's hatred of communism, Mao agreed with the necessity of national unity in order to defeat the Japanese imperialists and agreed to cooperate with their domestic enemy. In the aftermath of the Second Sino-Japanese War, Mao Zedong and Chiang Kai-shek engaged in peace talks, which quickly broke down and led to a new period of civil war. Facing a massive assault from the Kuomintang in 1946, the communists were forced to adopt a passive defense strategy relying on guerrilla warfare to wear down their opponents. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, the communists possessed a key advantage: support from the Soviet Union, which provided military aid and other crucial assistance to the communists. As the conflict dragged on, the tide began to turn in favor.
Do you guys think that the Soviet Union was like a prosperous country? No, at that time. But they still were willing to provide aid to China to fight off the nationalists. And if they had not done that, who knows what would have happened? Who knows if China would have survived at all? So, I mean, I think that's a good example of why it is important for a country like China to take up the role of this that the Soviet Union once had. The fact that the revisionists sent the Soviet economy into stagnation, whereas China's been thriving since the market reforms, is worth mentioning. I don't think you can equate Deng and Khrushchev. Well, I wasn't equating Deng and Khrushchev, but the idea that the Soviet economy just stagnated completely is not really true. It was actually growing at a pretty steady rate until, like, I believe, like, the mid-70s or late 70s, which then it started to stagnate more, but it never was, like, it was always growing. That's the thing. It was never, like, shrinking or not growing at all. It was growing. It was just growing slowly, and yes, reforms were needed, but... So yeah, you can say China's economy is thriving, and I think it has uplifted a lot of people. Again, you know, I'm not here to like attack China. I'm just saying that the Soviet Union, even while its economy was not growing at the rate that China's is, it was continually reducing inequality the entire time. It was reducing inequality, whereas with China's huge economy up, has also greatly increased inequality with all of the billionaires.
Of the communists. Symbolic victories were secured in northern cities, and eventually the communists recaptured village after village, then city after city, until finally reaching the capital. By 1949, the Kuomintang was on the brink of defeat, retreating to Taiwan, where they established a brutal regime and unleashed the White Terror. Meanwhile, Mao Zedong declared the establishment of the People's Republic of China, marking the end.
If you are remotely an honest person who isn't brainwashed or just pro-US imperialism, there's no way you can say that China doesn't own Taiwan or isn't entitled to Taiwan. You just can't. Because it's like if the Nazis fled to, some island off of England. No, that's not a good analogy. But another one is like if the Confederates fled to like some American island and killed everyone there and established their own government, and then England or France like defended that island from being invaded by the Union to like defeat the Confederacy once and for all. That's what Taiwan is. It's just like the bad guys fled to this island. The U.S. defended the bad guys on this island. And yeah. I believe China's government is introducing policies to reduce inequality. Could you send me an example of that?
Of the century of humiliation.
I believe you, I'm just curious.
The century of humiliation weighs heavy on the collective memory of China, and national rejuvenation remains at the forefront of China's governance. To achieve national rejuvenation, the Communist Party of China recognizes that old internal wounds need to be healed through stability, harmony, cooperation, and a foreign policy of peace. Under the leadership of the Communist Party, the nation has embarked on a radical path of reconstruction. Between 1949 and 1989, Chinese life expectancy nearly doubled from 36 to 68. Infant mortality fell from 25% to 4%. Literacy increased from 20 to over 90%, and overall consumption of cereals increased by 20%, while pork consumption tripled. The Communist Party of China continues to work with international partners to pursue policies and relationships that yield mutual benefits while taking conscious steps to avoid confrontation wherever possible. China has not dropped a bomb on another country in over 40 years. It has retained a neutral position on international...
Boo! Boo! Xi Jinping, bomb America! I'm joking. Okay, I'm joking, of course.
National and regional conflicts, and has consistently positioned itself as a neutral peace broker between nations. Even though 75 years have passed since the founding of the People's Republic of China, the Communist Party still has begrudged enemies both within China and abroad. And while cooperation is the preferred path, China is also taking significant steps to build its defense capabilities and ensure, through one way or another, that it will never be forced back into another century of humiliation like it was before communism.
Good. That was a great video. I learned a lot. It was short, relatively to the point. That was great. I hope China's paying this guy, because he's making good propaganda. I was gonna watch something else different, but I like that so much that I kind of want to check out this video. Xi Jinping's governance of China, which is probably not going to be nearly as dry as it sounds. He's probably going to actually just talk more about modern Chinese policy. So we could watch that. I also wanted to talk about this channel that's kind of popped up recently. They made videos in the past and they kind of went away, and now they're back again. And they seem a little sus, so I kind of wanted to talk about them. But we could also keep with the China theme as well. His Mao's China video was good too. Have you seen One Dime's video on Mao China? Although I think One Dime's video was mainly about the Cultural Revolution rather than the overall, like, Mao's China in general. So One Dime's video on Cultural Revolution is fantastic. It's incredible. But yeah, I think this is more generally, which would also be interesting to watch. But this, I feel like, is more relevant to today. He's like a leftist alpha male. Yeah, sort of. And I'm totally open to a leftist alpha male kind of thing, you know, like, but, you know, it can veer into, you know, fascism, basically, you know. Like, I think Hassan is a pretty good example of, like, alpha male leftism. But he's not really an alpha male. He's more just, like, I would say, like, a positive masculinity sort of thing. But, I don't know. Another thing that I think is sus is putting your name. Like, just being so open about what your name is, you know? Because, like, I don't know. Anyways. Fuck it, we're doing it.
All 2,400 pages of the governance of China. If you like This video presents a summary of key points contained in Xi Jinping's governance of China. I made this video for those who are interested in learning about Xi Jinping thought, but don't have the time to read all 2,400 pages of the governance of China. If you like the content produced on this channel, consider lending your support at the links in the description below. The Governance of China is a 4-volume collection of speeches and writings by Xi Jinping, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China, which outlines the official party perspective on China's development in the 21st century. The writings encompass Xi Jinping's views on economics, domestic and international politics, infrastructure, technology.
Did this guy actually read all 2,400 pages? That sounds brutal, because I was reading reviews of this book, and apparently it's extremely repetitive. Not to say it's bad or good or anything, but like people were saying, like it says the same things over and over.
Environmentalism, peaceful coexistence, and military affairs. The Governance of China is a unique text because it is a book written from a global historical perspective by a statesman with the power to actually shape the future course of a major country. Through an extensive grasp on Chinese as well as Western history and literature, Xi Jinping not only articulates the intricacies of China's internal development, but relates China's development to its growing role in global politics. The text does not present a Western-style critique of capitalism, couched in the language of negation and idealism, but instead presents a tangible framework for concrete steps in the arduous struggle of building a communist society. With the rise of the People's Republic of China, its growing power on the global stage, as well as an emerging soft power conflict with the West, it is increasingly important that the world understands what China is doing, how it got here, where it is headed, and how nations across the world factor into this world.
Oh man, I know the Maoists in my audience are going to get angry at me for just watching this video. So let me just say that I am just going in with an open mind to listen to what he has to say, right? I'm not watching this to endorse or condemn immediately. I'm just going in and listening, okay? And you should too. Just listen. That's all we're doing here. I just want to put that as a preface before I go any further.
World historic transformation seen with the rise of socialist China. China's relationship to Marxism-Leninism began in the early 20th century during a time of significant social and political upheaval. The country experienced several major internal struggles for a long period of time, including the Taiping Rebellion in the mid-19th century, the Boxer Rebellion at the dawn of the 20th century, and the overthrow of the Qing dynasty in 1911. The fall of the Qing dynasty was followed by the fragmentation of China into regions controlled by warlords and the Kuomintang, leaving the country in chaos and vulnerable to foreign powers. It wasn't until the 1917 Russian Revolution that the Chinese saw a clear example of how Marxism-Leninism could be applied to overthrow an oppressive regime and establish a socialist state. Inspired by the developments in Russia, Chinese intellectuals began to explore Marxism-Leninism as a solution to China's problems, which quickly led to the 1919 Democratic Revolution and the founding of the Communist Party of China in 1921. Mao Zedong, a key member of the party, played a crucial role in adapting Marxism-Leninism to China's specific conditions and predominantly rural population. His interpretation of Marxism-Leninism, known as Mao Zedong thought, emphasized the potential of the peasantry rather than the proletariat as the revolutionary class, marking a significant departure from classical Marxism but demonstrating the flexibility of Marxist theory in different historical and social contexts. Under Mao's leadership throughout the 1930s and 40s, the Communist Party engaged in various struggles against warlords, Kuomintang nationalists, and foreign invaders, notably during the Second Sino-Japanese War. In building the People's Liberation Army, the party recognized the importance of military strength and leadership. As Xi Jinping states, while it was engaged in violent struggle, the party came to recognize the irrefutable truth that it must command the gun and build a people's military of its own. Chinese people learned that it was an imperative to send the aggressors a message they would understand. War must be fought to deter aggression. Force must be met with force, and a victory is the best way to win peace and respect. We Chinese people do not provoke others, nor do we shy away from trouble. We do not give in to fear or yield in the face of difficulties and dangers. The Chinese nation will never cower before threats or be subdued by oppressors. By 1949, the communist victory in the Chinese Civil War and the establishment of the People's Republic of China marked the triumph of Marxism-Leninism in China and validated its significance in the Chinese Revolution. Over the past 95 years, the Communist Party of China has accomplished so many tasks which were thought to be impossible by other political forces. The reason for this has been precisely attributed to our adoption of Marxism as our guide of action. This has allowed our party to free itself from the limitations of all previous political forces, which focused on pursuing their own special interests. Departing from or abandoning Marxism, the party would lose its soul and direction. On the issue of Marxism as the fundamental guiding thought, we should not waver under any circumstances. Following the death of Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping rose to prominence and initiated the policy of reform and opening up in 1978. Reform and opening up recognized the dialectical necessity of adapting to changing conditions and constantly developing theory to guide necessary changes in practice. For China, the overall purpose of development is to open up to the world through globalization, cultural exchange, and knowledge sharing. The process of opening up produces outcomes that cause changes in the social structure that require reform. Reform and opening up is therefore seen by the Communist Party of China as an ongoing and holistic process that will continue on indefinitely. Deng Xiaoping designed and led the Reform and Opening Up initiative and the modernization drive with a view to improving the well-being of the Chinese people, stressing on many occasions that poverty is not socialism. Socialism means eliminating poverty. Unless you are developing the productive forces and raising people's living standards, you cannot say that you are building socialism. This policy marked a pragmatic shift towards prioritizing economic development over strict ideological purity, emphasizing the use of market mechanisms to develop the productive forces. The reforms introduced under Deng Xiaoping included decollectivizing agriculture, establishing special economic zones, and encouraging foreign investment. The new theoretical and practical foundations of reform and opening up allowed the Chinese economy to achieve swift growth, which accelerated rapidly after China's entrance into the World Trade Organization in 2001. Many criticized the party's embrace of pro-market reforms and integration into the capitalist world economy. But Deng Xiaoping and every paramount leader after him demonstrated that the process of moving towards the lofty ideal of communism unfolds at an incremental and gradual pace. Deng Xiaoping always understood that developing the forces of production would be a lengthy process and that China had a long march down the socialist road before approaching a new stage of socialist development. Reform and opening up catalyzed Chinese economic development, lifted hundreds of millions out of absolute poverty, and laid the groundwork for the development of what would become known as socialism with Chinese characteristics. Xi Jinping explains that this concept embraces a dialectical view of socialism that integrates the universal ideals of Marxism and socialism with China's unique historical and material conditions. Socialism with Chinese characteristics represents a theory, path, and system of how China will further advance down the socialist road through the implementation of theory into the practice of statecraft. The evolving nature of the theory is based on the necessity of informing practice based on changing conditions and the needs of the people as a whole. Xi Jinping describes it as a holistic theory that conceptualizes Chinese society in its totality. Every institution, policy, campaign, and long-term plan is informed by the lofty goal of achieving communism, correcting erroneous views and decisions, and unifying all mindsets, policies, and measures to carry China beyond the primary stage of socialism. Socialism with Chinese characteristics is built on the foundation of Marxism-Leninism and Mao Zedong thought, which offer basic scientific principles for understanding the world through a dialectical materialist worldview. Marxism-Leninism is seen as a universally applicable theory, while Mao Zedong thought represents this theory under specifically Chinese conditions. On top of this foundation is Deng Xiaoping theory, Jiang Zemin's concept of the three represents, and Hu Jintao's scientific outlook on development. Each of these contributions to socialism with Chinese characteristics is understood to be temporally determined or specific to unique circumstances at a given historical period of China's development. For example, in 2004, as China's growing market economy intensified social inequality.
So from what I know, this guy seems to be like the most pro-capitalist, this one.
Qualities, Jiang Zemin found it necessary to reiterate and solidify the party's commitment to people-centered and socialist development by introducing.
But maybe I'm wrong.
The three represents into the party constitution, ensuring the equal representation of economic, cultural, and people-centered development in governmental affairs. Lastly, the most recent contribution to socialism with Chinese characteristics has come from Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping thought marks a significant turning point in Chinese development and the theory of socialism with Chinese characteristics. The term thought.
Okay, they gotta come to like a final thing at some point, because if this just keeps going and every single new guy has their additional thing, then like 100 years from now, you're gonna have students like having to learn like 15 different dudes like application or their new innovation.
Has not been used to describe the theory of any paramount leader since.
Although, of course, they're always going to have to adapt because, you know, conditions change over time.
Mao, which signifies a deeper level of importance to the contribution. But furthermore, since achieving moderate prosperity in all respects, Xi Jinping emphasizes that China has entered a new stage of development and makes frequent reference to socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. In 1997, Jiang Zemin introduced the concept of the two centenary goals: to achieve a moderately prosperous society in all respects by 2021, the centenary of the Communist Party of China, and to achieve a modern socialist country that is prosperous, strong, democratic, culturally advanced, harmonious, and beautiful by 2049, the centenary of the People's Republic of China. The two centenary goals were taken up and popularized by Xi Jinping, who elevated them into a central theoretical component of socialism with Chinese characteristics, and used them as a national call for the Chinese people to continue pushing towards national rejuvenation. Working towards moderate prosperity in all respects saw remarkable progress in poverty reduction. From the end of 2012 to the end of 2017, the rural poor population decreased by 68.53 million, or about 70%. On average, 13.7 million people were lifted out of poverty annually, which was more than double the...
That is absolutely insane, by the way. You know, that's pretty incredible.
annual rate of reduction during previous poverty reduction programs. By 2020, all people in these regions were guaranteed food, clothing, compulsory education, basic medical care, and safe housing. Poverty-stricken rural areas saw increased rates of growth, family disposable income, and basic public services. China's poverty alleviation achievements are the culmination of people-centered development and economic planning. Throughout the first several decades of China's reform and opening up, means of production were used to produce means of production in order to catch up with the West. However, with the achievement of moderate prosperity in all respects, China's high-tech sector is now quickly approaching and even surpassing the West, standing at the cutting edge of scientific and technological breakthroughs in the fields of AI, quantum information, mobile communication.
Yeah, when it comes to like tech and AI, China has basically just like completely out-capitalismed America. Like with EVs, like electric vehicles, there's like thousands of EV companies competing with one another. It's basically, it's like a hyper-competitive state capitalist environment, mixed economy. But when they want to do capitalism, if they think they can use capitalism to be more competitive over the US, to develop the productive forces, whatever, they will do it. And that's why they created this incredible EV that's like incredibly cheap and all that, because they have like thousands of companies competing rather than just like a few monopolies. When it comes to that, they're basically just doing what America wishes it could do. My opinion when it comes to like human rights or freedom of speech is basically like what One Dime talks about, like a managed freedom of speech. Like, which is kind of what China already has, I believe. It's like you can even criticize China if it's done in a productive way. You can be like, China can do these things better by this. By doing this or that. It's just like if you are clearly like anti-China, from what I know, that you're in trouble. Which I don't have a problem with. I think that makes sense. Any state is not just going to let someone say, like, I think my government should be overthrown, you know? Those Chinese companies are still exploiting their own subaltern countries for their rail metals. What the hell does subaltern mean? But if you're talking about like Africa, yeah, I mean, there are definitely a lot of sketchy labor practices going on in Africa under China.
Blockchain, synthetic biology, gene editing, regenerative medicine, cosmology, robotics, and many others. Throughout the late 20th century, Chinese workers produced goods.
My question is whether China is going to become a victim of its own success. Because, you know, if their managed capitalism has been so successful, then what if people are going to start thinking like, well, this works great, you know? Like, this worked great. Why do we have to do anything else? I would rather live in China where you get arrested for saying that, but my life is actually improved. Unlike America, which has freedom of speech, but your life is never improved in any way, and you live in fucking misery, and the government doesn't help you at all. Basically, that's America. I'll take China. I'll take China any day. Xi Jinping, please. I will be your propagandist. Because China actually improves the lives of its people, despite its flaws.
Were exported abroad rather than consumed at home. However, the economic success experienced throughout the 21st century has allowed for greater considerations to be made regarding people's well-being, the natural environment, and social justice. China's new economic strategy emphasizes high-quality development that is innovative, coordinated, green, open, and inclusive. As Xi Jinping says, we must put the people's interests first. Under no circumstances can we ever alter our standpoint of breathing the same air as the people and sharing a common future with them. Nor can we forget our purpose, which is to serve the people wholeheartedly, nor can we discard the view of historical materialism that the people are the real heroes. Serving the people wholeheartedly and always representing the fundamental interests of the greatest possible majority of the people are the important preconditions and foundation for the implementation and development of consultative democracy. According to Xi Jinping, from 2021 to 2035, China will build on the foundations created by its moderately prosperous society with 14 more years of hard work to ensure that socialist model realized. The party's vision is that by the end of this stage, China's economic and technological strength will have increased significantly, the rights of the people will be adequately protected, social etiquette and civility will be enhanced, people will lead more comfortable lives, the size of the middle income group will have grown significantly, a modern social governance system will have taken shape, and society will be full of vitality, harmonious, and orderly. Xi Jinping emphasizes that this process represents the movement towards the higher stage of socialism. Achieving communism is the highest ideal of the Communist Party of China, and party members, particularly party officials, should maintain a firm belief in lofty communist ideals, along with the common ideal of building socialism with Chinese characteristics, and pursue them with dedication.
I think that's a pretty good quote, because he doesn't pretend like Khrushchev did, that communism will be achieved by the 1980s. He says it's a lofty ideal, but he also he says it's a lofty ideal, which it is, but he also doesn't ignore it. He still says it's something that we should strive for. I think that's a pretty damn good quote.
Xi Jinping recognizes that capital still has an important role to play in China's modernization efforts and encourages its orderly regulation rather than abolition. He says that after the launch of the reform and opening up, we broke free from a restrictive mindset on ownership and came to realize that capital, as a major factor of production, can serve as a tool for the market to allocate resources and an effective means to grow the economy. Yet we must be aware that capital is profit-driven in nature, and if unregulated and unconstrained, it will cause immeasurable damage to the economy and society. The 2008 global financial crisis has taught us that allowing capital to blindly pursue profit will result in chaos, and that global prosperity cannot be built on the shaky foundations of a market without moral constraints. The growing gap between rich and poor is both unfair and unsustainable. It is important for us to use both the invisible hand and the visible hand to form synergy between market forces and government functions, and strive to achieve both efficiency and fairness. We must set up traffic lights for capital flows. Traffic on the road needs to be controlled with traffic lights. Likewise, capital also needs to be regulated. No capital of any type can be allowed to run out of control. We must prevent the unchecked growth of capital and combat monopolies, exorbitant profits, sky-high prices, destructive speculation, and unfair competition. We must reinforce effective regulation of capital in accordance with the law. The socialist market economy is law-based, and capital must operate in accordance with the law. Curbing the disorderly expansion of capital is not intended.
Yeah, and I mean, the idea that America is free speech, like, it's really not in a lot of ways. It's just more subtle about it. Like, Michael Prenti, for example. He was censored numerous times over his career. He was censored numerous times. And he was prevented, even though he was a very prestigious and popular thinker, he was prevented from, going on a lot of talk shows and that kind of thing. I was going somewhere with that. And then also, in terms of censorship in the U.S., there's also the example of the Gaza genocide, and just how insanely many people have been censored. Like, it's actually crazy how many people have been censored. I've been documenting it, but there's just a lot, There's a lot.
To deny its worth, but to ensure its orderly growth. To regulate capital, we should strictly enforce the relevant laws and regulations and improve those that are incomplete. We must support the healthy growth of capital through regulation and guidance. The 2021 centenary goal of achieving a moderately
That kind of just sounds like social democracy.
prosperous society in all respects was tied to achieving quantitative benchmarks in economic development, such as the elimination of absolute poverty, increasing the numbers of the middle class through elevated living standards,
Yeah, it doesn't really seem like, if we're just going off of GDP, which is not a very good measurement, but if we're going off of that, then it was really Hu Jintao that actually started the increase, and not Deng, really.
growing the GDP
Or really jump-started it, at least.
of the country through technological innovations and advancements, and closing the gap between rural and urban economies. However, after 2021, when these benchmarks had been surpassed, greater focus shifted towards qualitative standards, such as high-tech, people-oriented, and green development. Xi Jinping's vision for the future of China is of a green, environmentally sustainable, and beautiful nation, leading the world in sustainable technologies and development to move towards a model of ecological civilization. He explains the necessity of green development for China by pointing out that the total population of well-off countries in the world is about 1 billion. China has more than 1.3 billion people. If we are all to become modernized, the well-off population...
Oh yeah, Norm Finkelstein lost his tenure over his advocacy for Palestine. Yeah, I mean, he couldn't find a job in the U.S. either. He had to go to Turkey. David Graeber, for all my disagreements with David Graeber, he lost his job in the U.S. and he had to go to England. So U.S. absolutely has a lot of censorship. They're just not, they try to hide it.
must more than double. If we were to consume as much energy and production in daily lives as the present well-off people do, all of the existing resources in the world would be far from enough for us. The old path seems to be a dead end. Where is the new road? It lies in scientific and technological innovation and in the accelerated transition from factor-driven and investment-driven growth to innovation-driven growth. In an overall effort of progressing towards a future that is both prosperous and sustainable, China's high-tech sector continues to develop new green technologies, such as electric vehicles, hydropower, nuclear energy, energy storage systems, smart grids, green infrastructure, solar and wind energy, as well as carbon capture technologies. We should endeavor to build a green, clean, and beautiful world. The Earth is the only shared home for humanity. Now, a few individuals are trying to find a new home in outer space, but that is still a distant dream. In the foreseeable future, human beings still need to live on this planet. This is a fact that will not change.
True. Well said. How will China divest itself from the infinite growth global order? Well, it seems like Xi Jinping is arguing for that transition. He's arguing for a more sustainable economy. This sounds like the same green optimism that's shilled in the U.S. I mean, are the green optimists in the U.S. anywhere near power, though? In China, the green optimists are in power, which is why China is building more solar power than every other country on Earth combined, I believe. Let me see. Not to mention they made an incredibly cheap EV. I can't find that, but all I know is that they're building an insane amount of solar power. So that's what happens when you have green optimists actually in power.
We must defend the Earth's boundaries, both tangible and intangible, to ensure harmony between humanity and nature. We need to improve planning regarding our territorial space, implement our functional zoning strategy, and draw up red lines for ecological conservation. We should accelerate efforts to establish a system of nature reserves, improve biodiversity protection networks, and set reasonable spatial limits for economic and social activities. We will never again seek economic growth at the cost of the environment.
I'm really liking this stuff, honestly.
China's rule of law functions as one of the primary means of cultivating a harmonious society of internal stability and social order, where conflicts are managed in the interests of overall social cohesion. The Democratic People's Dictatorship is composed of the four classes of Chinese society: the national bourgeoisie, the petty bourgeoisie, workers, and farmers. Deng Xiaoping pointed out that although China's socialist economy and political system were imperfect, they have continued to improve and are much better than the capitalist system, based on the law of the jungle and the principle of getting ahead at the expense of others. Our system will improve more and more with the passage of time. By absorbing the progressive elements of other countries, it will become the best in the world. Capitalism can never achieve this. Elsewhere, he added, Democracy in capitalist societies is bourgeois democracy. In fact, it is the democracy of monopoly capitalists. It is no more than a system of multi-party elections, separation of judicial, executive, and legislative powers, and a bicameral legislature. Ours is the system of the People's Congress and the People's Democracy, under the leadership.
That's a really weird quote, because that's not how all democracies and capitalist systems are. I don't know what the fuck Deng is talking about, but he doesn't know what he's talking about there. Like, first of all, I don't think you need a bicameral legislator. I'm pretty sure some capitalist democracies have unicameral legislators, and I don't know, the separation of judicial, executive, and legislative powers. I know that's an American thing, but is that really for all capitalist democracies? There's like a big separation? Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Of the Communist Party. We cannot
But
adopt.
I'm pretty sure they don't all have bicameral legislatures.
The practices of the West. The great advantage of the socialist system is that when the central leadership makes a decision, it is promptly implemented without interference from any other quarters. In contrast to the Anglo-American legal system, based on the supposed separation of legal powers, the Chinese system was created through a combination of socialist innovation and traditional Chinese practices to produce a legal system that is not only functional, but also promotes harmony and moral virtue by reflecting the democratic will of the Chinese people. According to Xi Jinping, Chinese law epitomizes the ethos and wisdom of the Chinese nation and contains many excellent ideas and concepts worth passing on. These include the governance strategy of enforcing public discipline through the application of both morality and law, the people-centered concept that the people are the foundation of the state, and only when the foundation is solid will the state be stable, the wish for social harmony without lawsuits, the idea of prudence that prioritizes moral enlightenment over legal punishment, the concept of equality that advocates passing judgment in accordance with the law and ensures that the punishment fits the crime, and the principle of leniency towards widowers, widows, orphans, childless couples, the elderly, children, women, and people with disabilities. All of these shed light on the wisdom of Chinese traditional legal culture.
What's obviously missing there is, like, you know, minorities and, you know, queer people.
Despite the many examples of Chinese law reflecting the democratic will of the masses, Western critics insist on characterizing the Chinese system as authoritarian.
Can you guys stop yapping about Vosh in the comments, please? Or I'm going to start banning people.
Framing China as desiring to expand its control outward. But Xi Jinping responds to these accusations by reiterating that China will never seek hegemony. As China continues to grow, some people start to worry. Some take a dark view of China and assume that it will inevitably become a threat as it develops further. They even portray China as being a terrifying Mephisto who will someday suck the soul of the world. Such absurdity couldn't be more ridiculous, yet some people, regrettably, never tire of preaching it. This shows that prejudice is indeed hard to overcome. In addressing the question of whether the party is above the law, Xi Jinping stated, "This question itself is problematic and is a political trap. We must leave no room for confusion, but answer the question clearly. Party leadership and law-based governance are not in conflict, but inherently coherent. Our country's laws embody the will of the party and the people, and our party acts in accordance with the law, which manifests an inseparable relationship between the two. All party members should keep in mind that the party leadership is the soul of our country's socialist rule of law and the biggest difference between Chinese and Western rule of law." China is the fourth largest country in terms of geographic territory, the second most populous country with 1.4 billion people, the world's second largest national economy, and it holds a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. However, China's economic underdevelopment has historically hindered its ability to outwardly exercise power or influence. Progress towards the Chinese dream of national rejuvenation is therefore also tied to the party's desire to restore China's pride and place on the world stage. Xi Jinping's vision for China's global role is deeply influenced by the principles of peaceful coexistence and mutual benefit. China's approach to international relations is governed by the idea that all countries should pursue development that is inclusive and beneficial to all parties involved. Xi Jinping has frequently spoken of the need to build a global community of shared future, where nations work together to address common challenges and achieve mutual prosperity. China's commitment to peaceful coexistence is reflected in its opposition to protectionism and economic hegemony. Xi Jinping has made it clear that China is firmly against any form of protectionism and is willing to resolve economic and trade differences through consultation rather than confrontation. This stance is part of China's broader strategy
Give me just a sec. Some weirdo I got a ban. Fuck. Fuck. Hold up. Hold up. Hold up. Enjoy your communist hello hole. What is a hello hole? The fuck is a hello hole, bro?
To promote the establishment of a multilateral trade system characterized by balanced and mutually beneficial development. By advocating for a rules-based international order, China seeks to ensure that global economic governance is fair and inclusive, allowing all nations to benefit from globalization. It is important for all countries to pursue inclusive development for the benefit of all. To lead a happy life is the common aspiration of people all over the world. The progress of human society requires a continued effort from all countries to further opening up, cooperation, and win-win development, and reject isolation, confrontation, and monopoly. In a world of deeper economic globalization, the pursuit of the law of the jungle and winner takes all leads nowhere. Inclusive growth for all is surely the right way forward. Countries need to rise above differences and leverage their respective strengths to pursue inclusive growth in the face of common risks and challenges. This way, people of all countries will be able to share in the benefits of economic globalization and global growth.
I get why Xi Jinping can't stand talking to Keir Starmer. Like imagine that fucking prick Keir Starmer coming to you and lecturing you about human rights and the Uyghur genocide, you know, as the UK enthusiastically supports the Gaza genocide, and is the UK is also just straight up rating journalists, is rating the houses of journalists that disagree with that are attacking the UK over the Gaza genocide. It's crazy. Keir Starmer, you know, the kind of person that Keir Starmer is just a complete black void of evil, just an empty hole where nothing resides in. Not to mention the UK literally destroyed China. And then Keir Starmer comes to Xi Jinping and lectures him. Keir Starmer's lucky that Xi Jinping doesn't fucking detain Keir Starmer and re-educate him. Xi Jinping is giving Keir Starmer and his entire cabinet a luxury by not re-educating them.
One of the most
disgusting scumbag, Keir Starmer. Just an absolute void of a human being.
Significant expressions of China's commitment to peaceful development and mutual benefit is the Belt and Road Initiative. Launched in 2013, the Belt and Road Initiative is a global economic development strategy that aims to enhance connectivity and cooperation between countries across Asia, Europe, and Africa. The initiative is a manifestation of Xi Jinping's vision for an open and inclusive world order, where economic cooperation is not based on ideological alignment or geopolitical considerations, but on mutual benefit. China has grown from a poor and weak country to the second largest economy, not through military expansion or colonial plunder, but through the hard work of its people and their efforts to uphold peace. China will never waver in its pursuit of peaceful development. No matter how strong its economy grows, China will never seek hegemony, expansion, or spheres of influence. History has borne this out, and will continue to do so. We will not, however, accept condescending sermons from those who feel they have the right to lecture us.
Sadly, he has to accept it when fucking Keir Starmer comes. Somewhat. He didn't do it with Justin Trudeau, though. Yeah, someone put the Justin Trudeau one in the chat. That's a really funny example.
China shares a common destiny with all third world countries. China will never seek hegemony or bully others, but will always side with the third world, and China will oppose any forms of hegemony and safeguard world peace. Xi Jinping has repeatedly emphasized that the Belt and Road Initiative is not a geopolitical or military alliance, but an economic initiative aimed at fostering global development. The Belt and Road Initiative was launched in response to the call for reforming the global governance system. It is an open and inclusive process that does not exclude any party. It is not designed to form an exclusive bloc or China club. Its participation is not based on ideology and is certainly not a zero-sum game. Any country that wants to participate in this initiative is welcome to do so. China's approach to international relations is also characterized by a strong commitment to the principles of non-interference and respect for sovereignty. Informed by its own historical experiences under foreign domination, China is acutely sensitive to the rights of other nations to self-determination. This sensitivity is reflected in China's adherence to the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence: mutual respect for territorial integrity, mutual non-aggression, non-interference in each other's internal affairs, mutual benefit, and peaceful coexistence with regard to ideological differences. We have never abused, oppressed, or subjugated the people of any other country, and we never will. By the same token, we will never allow any foreign force to abuse, oppress, or subjugate us. Anyone.
But when it comes to something like Gaza, like, you gotta do something. Like, at a minimum, China should cut all economic ties with Israel. All economic ties. Cut all of it. Right? China will be fine if it cuts all economic ties with Israel. And diplomatic ties, like I believe some countries have done. Like, okay, maybe they don't have to, like, invade Israel, but they could at least cut economic ties.
One who would attempt to do so would find themselves on a collision course with a great wall of steel forged by over 1.4 billion Chinese people. Big countries should treat smaller ones as equals instead of acting as hegemons, imposing their wills on others. A country cannot have security while others are in turmoil, as threats facing other countries are likely to haunt it too. When neighbors are in trouble, instead of strengthening one's own forces, one should extend a helping hand to them. As the saying goes, united we stand, divided we fall. All countries should pursue common, comprehensive, and sustainable security through cooperation. For all the rhetoric about a clash of civilizations or the superiority of one civilization over another, it is the diversity of civilizations that sustains human progress. Indeed, mutual learning between different cultures is a shared aspiration of all peoples. The People's Republic of China has overcome monumental tasks in liberating itself from the century.
Give it time. Bro, time's up, bro. Time's up. They gotta do something more. There is no time. there is no time, you know? Like 1 in 4 Gazans are dead at this point. Practically. Okay, Cobra Commander, but you see how that's not good, right? You see how that's not good, right?
Of humiliation and tackling major social problems. Victory in the Korean War, eradicating widespread opium addiction, and lifting hundreds of millions out of poverty are only a few examples of the monumental achievements by China under the People's Republic. However, China still faces challenges that are deeply rooted in the past. One of the greatest and most persistent challenges facing China today is the need for national reunification with Taiwan.
True!
When China was a weak country, the Japanese invaded and occupied Taiwan, inflicting a traumatic experience on all Chinese people on both sides of the straits. While Taiwan was under Japanese occupation, many Taiwanese shed their blood and laid down their lives to fight against this encroachment on China's sovereignty, proving they were inseparable members from the extended family of the Chinese nation. The Chinese nation has an honorable tradition of opposing division and safeguarding unity. Secessionism directed towards Taiwan independence is the greatest obstacle to national reunification and a grave danger to national rejuvenation. Those who forget their roots, betray their motherland, and seek to split the country will come to no good end. They will be condemned by the people and indicted by history. Taiwan is seen by Xi Jinping as an inalienable part of China, and the Taiwan question as a wound left by history. He states that the blood of the Chinese nation flows in every Chinese person, and the bond between people on both sides of the Taiwan Straits cannot be altered by any force. We people on both sides of the Taiwan Straits are Chinese and share a natural affinity and national identity built on kinship and mutual assistance, a fact that can never be altered by any force or any people. Xi Jinping invites all Chinese on both sides of the Taiwan Straits to recognize their common history, reunite as a people, and share in China's growing prosperity. We must handle cross-straits relations on the basis of a clear understanding of the trend of history. The great renewal of the Chinese nation has never been closer thanks to the tireless efforts of all the sons and daughters of China. We should view from high ground the great trend of history with changing times and the rise of the Chinese nation, and realize that the peaceful development of cross-straits relations has become part and parcel of China's great renewal. Sooner or later, we will have to resolve the political disputes that have long existed in cross-straits relations rather than leave them to later generations. No one should underestimate the resolve, the will, and the ability of the Chinese people to defend our national sovereignty and territorial integrity. The complete reunification of our country can and will be realized. While historic challenges such as national reunification continue to persist from the past, the new era is also giving rise to new challenges. Perhaps the greatest and most threatening problem confronting China in the new era is the threat to the Communist Party's authority amid the growing economic power of the national bourgeoisie. If the economic power of the national bourgeoisie is translated into political power, it threatens to strengthen counter-revolutionary tendencies and drag the country back into factionalism, violence, and chaos. Therefore, the party keeps tight controls and regulations on the economic power of the national bourgeoisie in order to suppress its political power. This is also why Xi Jinping frames corruption as an existential threat facing the party. The biggest threat our party faces as a governing party is corruption. Facts prove that if corruption is allowed to spread, it will eventually lead to the destruction of a party and the fall of a government. In combating corruption and upholding integrity, we must also oppose ideas and practices smacking of privilege. Members of the Communist Party of China are at all times ordinary members of the working people. Party members are only entitled to some personal benefits and job-related functions and powers prescribed by law and policies, and must not seek any personal gain or privilege over and above those. Combating corruption means upholding the party's commitment to the people and the high ideals of communism. The party came to power through unwavering dedication to the people, demonstrating unparalleled sacrifices in serving their interests. And today's leaders have large shoes to fill in upholding the legacy of the party and continuing the long march down the socialist road. Through China's revolution, development, and reform, innumerable party members laid down their lives for the cause of the party and the people. What supported them was the moral strength gained from the utmost importance they attached to their revolutionary ideals. Some are skeptical about communism, considering it a fantasy that will never come true. Some do not believe in Marxism-Leninism, but in ghosts and gods, seeking spiritual solace in feudal superstitions, showing intense interest in fortune-telling, worship of Buddha, and God's advice for solving their problems. Some have little sense of principle, justice, or right and wrong, and perform their duties in a muddle-headed manner. Some even yearn for Western social systems and values, losing their confidence in the future of socialism. And others adopt an equivocal attitude towards political provocations against the leadership of the Communist Party of China, the path of socialism with Chinese characteristics, and other
If you wanna, by the way, if you want me to watch something else, donate now, because if not, I'm pretty much gonna end the stream after this video is done, because I gotta get some rest for work tomorrow.
matters of principle. They passively avoid relevant arguments without the courage to express their opinions, or even deliberately deliver ambiguous messages. Isn't it a monstrous absurdity that party officials, especially high-ranking ones, take no position in the face of major issues of principle, political incidents, and sensitive issues?
True.
As part of its efforts to combat party corruption and promote upright public officials, party discipline is enforced from the highest to lowest ranks. All party members are mandated to learn the teachings of Marx, Engels, Lenin, Mao, Deng Xiaoping theory, the Three Represents, the scientific outlook on development, and Xi Jinping thought to grasp the history, outlook, tactics, strategies, and goals of the party. Xi Jinping emphasizes that studying these works helps ensure ideological unity, strengthen the legitimacy of the Chinese Communist Party, and guide future governance. Learning from past leaders and adapting Marxism to China's evolving needs helps maintain political stability, reinforce party discipline, and address modern challenges while promoting a distinct Chinese path forward. Xi Jinping asserts that communism is not as simple as a meal of goulash, and it cannot be attained easily, but we cannot dismiss it as an illusion or choose not to be loyal communists just because there is a long way to go. Our revolutionary ideals are of supreme importance. Communism is the ultimate ideal of communists, and it needs generations of strenuous effort to achieve. If we all see it as no more than an illusion, if we deem it unworthy of hard work and sacrifice, communism will never come. What we do today in upholding and developing Chinese socialism is the real effort towards the ultimate ideal. Revolutionary ideals are more important than anything else. The party is called the Communist Party of China because since day one, our party has made communism its highest ideal. The reason our party is able to rise again and again through hardships and adversities is because the party has always held on to this great ideal and aspiration. In addition to the Chinese classics of Marxism-Leninism, members of the Communist Party are also encouraged to gain an appreciation of the best traditions of Chinese thought, such as Confucianism. Confucian ideals of ethical leadership, moral governance, and social harmony align well with the party's focus on integrity, particularly in regards to anti-corruption efforts. Xi Jinping sees Confucianism as
Is one of the reasons that China has been somewhat successful, does that have a rooting in Confucianism at all? Or like the idea of meritocracy?
complementary to the larger framework of socialist governance, integrating it into a larger Marxist framework and worldview. But Xi Jinping further argues that it is necessary to study the great teachings of other cultures as well. The Communist Party of China was conceived based on a European critique of capitalism and a Russian example of revolutionary struggle. Therefore, the ideological foundation of the Communist Party of China is firmly grounded in the works of foreign cultures. Xi Jinping argues that it is necessary for China to continue learning from other cultures, but warns of the danger of becoming overly subsumed by Western influence. A number of people, even including some party members, cannot see the underlying dangers of accepting the universal values that have developed in the West over hundreds of years, along with certain Western political dogma. They argue we need not reject them since we would not suffer any significant harm by accepting them. Some even regard Western theories and discourse as the gold standard and thus unconsciously become trumpeteers of Western capitalist ideology. Studying Marxist classics, the theory of socialism with Chinese characteristics, the great works of traditional Chinese culture, as well as the worldly literature of other civilizations, is necessary for cultivating strong socialist values and practices.
That's pretty crazy. It shows how powerful China's become. That's a pretty crazy chart, dude. This is why I don't think China needs to worry about the US, like, cutting economic ties, because, like, I mean, look at this. China has plenty of other markets.
Socialism with Chinese characteristics, the great works of traditional Chinese culture, as well as the worldly literature of other civilizations, is necessary for cultivating strong socialist values and practices. Xi Jinping explains that the core socialist values that we should cultivate and practice are prosperity, democracy, civility, harmony, freedom, equality, justice, the rule of law, patriotism, dedication, integrity, and friendship. This not only means adhering to the constitution, direction, and strategy of the party, but going beyond what is required through a sense of patriotic and socialist duty in contributing towards national rejuvenation. The ideal party official is honest, well-read, incorruptible, pragmatic, and unwavering in his or her commitment to the lofty goal of achieving a communist society. However, only a small minority of party members approach this high standard. Some party officials have learned socialist theory by rote and don't have a firm grasp on how their role relates to the broader social totality. Some party officials simply join the party as a means of advancing their careers in the public sector. Others have become complacent, having given up on the prospect of ever achieving a communist society and simply go through the motions. Still others seek to do the bare minimum to get by and avoid making any difficult decisions for fear of being scrutinized, and party are unwavering in his or her commitment to the lofty goal of achieving a communist society. However, only a small minority of party members approach this high standard. Some party officials have learned socialist theory by rote and don't have a firm grasp on how their role relates to the broader social totality. Some party officials simply join the party as a means of advancing their careers in the public sector. Others have become complacent, having given up on the prospect of ever achieving a communist society and simply go through the motions. Still others seek to do the bare minimum to get by and avoid making any difficult decisions for fear of being scrutinized and pass the buck down to lower officials.
Wow.
In Xi Jinping's words, the main features of self-indulgence are mental laxity, resting on one's laurels, vanity, coveting pleasure, pursuing ostentation, and seeking to keep oneself amused. Some party officials have become demoralized, and their faith has been shaken. Their philosophy of life is to indulge themselves in pleasure-seeking, drinking your fill as long as you have wine to drink, and seizing the moments of contentment in life and making the most of them.
I mean, I really don't think how you can disagree with most of the stuff he's saying here. Like, I've struggled to disagree with almost anything he's said except, you know, interfering internationally. Like, wanting to just... That's the one major thing I really disagree with. There was, I think, something else I disagreed with, but I can't remember.
In favor of material comforts, vulgar amusements, revelry, drinking, and a life of luxury. Some take on easy tasks and shirk hard work because they have no taste for hardship and effort. They lack motivation and new goals because they are happy with the status quo, satisfied with their limited knowledge and understanding, and content with their past achievements. They idle through the day flipping through newspapers, drinking tea, and chatting, their gaze wandering abstractly because they have no purpose. Xi Jinping's approach to governing China is also informed by the historical lessons drawn from the collapse of the Soviet Union. He cites the failure of the Soviet Union as a warning for China, emphasizing that one of the key reasons for its collapse was the detachment of the Communist Party from the people. In Xi Jinping's view, the Soviet leadership became a privileged group of bureaucrats who served their own interests rather than the broader population, leading to a loss of popular support and ultimately to the downfall of the Soviet Union. For Xi Jinping, this experience serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of maintaining a close connection between the party and the people. He insists that Chinese leadership must be vigilant in staying connected to the populace, ensuring that policies are effective and serve the broader public interest. This emphasis on connection between the party and the people is seen as crucial for avoiding the pitfalls that led to the collapse of former socialist states. As China becomes wealthier and people experience a better life, many no longer feel the need to become politically engaged. This is a major concern for the Communist Party and its connection with the people as a fundamental basis for political action. As Xi Jinping says, we must be very clear, there are still many inadequacies in our work and many difficulties and challenges to face. The main ones are as follows: unbalanced and inadequate development, public well-being, poverty alleviation, disparities in developing between rural and urban areas, income distribution, employment, education, healthcare, housing, elderly care, and civic awareness. Decisions.
Is this video doing anything to change your mind on China being committed to communism? I would say so, yeah.
Made by the Communist Party must be informed by the people through democratic processes at the grassroots level, with active engagement in elections for local people's congresses and village committees, as well as consultative democracy.
He sounds very serious, based on his writings.
The challenge of building socialist values, political consciousness, and democratic participation is a growing concern, particularly in regard to Chinese youth. Unlike many previous generations who were required to sacrifice so much to build China's productive forces, Chinese youth today are born into a world where those sacrifices are bearing great fruit. In contrast to the life of struggle carried out by previous generations, the youth of today can expect to enjoy a much freer and more prosperous lifestyle. Under such conditions, the theories of Marxism-Leninism and Mao Zedong thought are increasingly being seen as irrelevant or outdated to the quickly modernizing and prosperous Chinese society.
Anyone like that who thinks like Maoism and Marxism-Leninism is irrelevant in the modern day is the exact kind of person that should be put in prison for life for being a fucking moron. It's like, oh, we're rich now. We don't have to worry about Marxism or whatever. It's like, how did you get to where you are, you fucking Neanderthal? You got there through, at least in some ways, trying to follow the ideas of Marx and Lenin, who have clearly been proven right in terms of how much, living standards have improved.
Today's youth often seem less interested in the history of class struggle than they are in new technologies, fashion, music, travel, and Western art.
It's funny because a lot of this sounds exactly like what happened in the Soviet Union, where the West's art and all that was fetishized by youth.
Therefore, the party sees the need to continue educating itself so that it may educate the masses and the youth on the importance of committing oneself to the lofty ideals of communism. The emerging digital realm is one new area of social life that is giving rise to novel social problems. China has more netizens than any other country in the world, and the Communist Party of China encourages them to use the internet as a tool to represent Chinese culture abroad. The rapid technological development seen in the digital realm has opened new opportunities, but has also opened communication networks for terrorists and cybercriminals. The internet cannot be a lawless place. The use of the internet to advocate the toppling of the government, preach religious extremism, or incite separatism and terrorism must be resolutely prevented and punished. Under absolutely no circumstances can such activities be allowed to go unchecked. Digital platforms have also introduced the problem of online circulation of disinformation. Despite the many historic achievements in advancing human rights and the well-being of the people, the Communist Party of China frequently comes under attack by Western powers through disinformation channels such as Radio Free Asia. With the vast growth in the number of users of microblogs, WeChat, and other social network services and instant communication tools, how to strengthen oversight within a legal framework, guide public opinion, and ensure the orderly dissemination of online information while safeguarding national security and social stability has become a pressing problem for us. A sound atmosphere for the expression of opinion online does not imply that there should be only one voice and one...
I mean, it's okay to like Western jeans and rock music. That's all fine. Culturally, but when you start thinking like Western values are better, like democracy, Western democracy and liberalism, that's the problem.
Rather, it means that people are not permitted to conflate right and wrong, circulate rumors, cause trouble, violate the law, or commit crimes. It means that people cannot overstep the boundaries of the Constitution and other laws. China's economic development has been a driving force in the creation of an emerging multipolar world. This global shift in the redistribution of economic power can be seen in the flourishing development of Chinese projects, notably the Belt and Road Initiative and the BRICS multilateral partnership. Under Xi Jinping's leadership, China has emerged as a dominant power on the world stage, which has presented hegemonic powers with a new challenge. Many Western countries have regressed back into economic nationalism, the erection of trade barriers, sanctions, and other soft power tools mobilized to disrupt the creation of a multipolar world. But as Xi Jinping asserts, whether you like it or not, the global economy is the great ocean from which you cannot escape. Any attempt to cut off the flow of capital, technologies, products, industries, and people between economies and channel the waters into the ocean back into isolated lakes and creeks is simply not possible. Indeed, it runs counter to the historical trend. The history of humanity tells us that problems are not to be feared. What should concern us is refusing to face up to problems and not knowing what to do about them. The persistence of regional conflicts, terrorism, poverty, unemployment, economic crises, refugee waves, and widening income gaps are problems that have accelerated under the global economy, shaped by unipolarity and Western universalism.
Most rock is crap. I mean, that's a very broad brush to paint. I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of rock. It's a huge genre. I think, I don't know.
But these problems are not inevitable outcomes of economic globalization. Rather, they are the consequences of excessive pursuit of profit by financial capital and the grave failure of financial regulation. War, conflict, and regional turbulence have created many problems, and their solution lies in making peace, promoting reconciliation, and restoring stability. Simply blaming economic globalization for the world's problems is neither consistent with reality nor helpful in finding solutions. Xi Jinping sees a bright future.
Xi Jinping is directly attacking anarchists there.
Problems is neither consistent with reality nor helpful in finding solutions. Xi Jinping sees a bright future for China, enabling it to play a role on the world stage to promote peace and cooperation among multiple poles of power, rather than domination and submission to a single one. I have made it clear again and again that China's door will never be closed. It will only open even wider. China will never waver in its effort to pursue high-quality opening up. China will never falter in its efforts to pursue an open world economy, and China will never relent in its efforts to pursue a global community of shared future.
All right, well, I thought that was a very enlightening and interesting video. And if he actually read all 2,400 pages, then good for him. Kudos. But yeah, I mean, I thought that was pretty compelling, honestly. But yeah, that's going to be it for me for tonight. Thank you for watching. If you want to support me, you can check out the links in the description or subscribe to my Patreon. And yeah.